Hello there, everybody. Welcome along to EFL Debate and a brand new series of the League Two EFL debates. It's a season preview, and who better to be joined by them than Matt Boosie from GillsInTheBlood TV and Tom from Tom H Williams 23 on Twitter, who's been producing some excellent EFL and non-league content over the course of summer. And Matt's obviously the go-to guy on the Gills. Good evening to you, gents. Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate you joining us. I guess let's dive straight into it and go to our predictions for the League Two season, which you can see on the overlay here. I wanted to, I'll start on this one because I wanted to challenge a few people on their predictions. Each of you will get the opportunity to do this as well. I want to challenge you, Tom, on your prediction for Bradford City to finish in the top 7, because a lot of EFL pundits have gone a bit cold on Bradford City despite their stature in the division. So why have you still gone for them finishing in the playoffs?
I think last season, obviously, I think they were disappointed where they finished. You know, they ultimately fell short, and I think that Mark Hughes, obviously, while he's a massive name, he was adjusting to the level, I think, and I think people perhaps overlooked that he was, a huge name and a successful manager in that he's managing the top division, but he's never managed, below that. So I think some sort of slack had to be cut for him, and I think that going into this season, he will have learned from that. I really, really like the addition of Patterson from Harrogate, and I think they have enough in their side to really to push into those playoff places again. And I think if they aren't up there in January, they'll spend as well. I think that they'll back Hughes, and I just think it's a case of he might not have had his strongest season, but he got them in the playoffs last season. I think he'll do it again this year. But I appreciate why people are cold on them, and because it's so competitive this season, they're perhaps the one that have been unanimously chosen to drop out of those spots.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, we discussed on this podcast Bradford a little bit last season, and for me, a little bit reliant on individuals at both ends. Harry Lewis had an incredible season between the sticks. Andy Cook obviously got 28 goals up top, and his individual quality, I think, was huge in why they were able to finish in the playoffs. It did feel like beyond that, there were a couple of players who had 7 out of 10 seasons, and one or two beyond that who had excellent patches of form. But it did feel like between both boxes, Bradford were unconvincing last season. Do you feel like they've improved enough this summer to sort of recapture their place in the top 7?
No, I'm with you. I've not gone as low as you, I must admit. I thought 14th was a fairly substantial drop-off, but I don't see them being in the top 7. I think, like you said, and I said on my own season preview, and I think there's an over-reliance on a handful of players. So the concern is that if Andy Cook doesn't replicate a near 30-goal season, where do the goals come from? Have they got enough to be spread around amongst the rest of the squad to get them into the top 7 or higher? Because I'd imagine the target is probably purely because of the size of the club and the following, that anything outside the top 7 would certainly be seen as a failure. Potentially, if they're not in the top 3, it might be seen as at least putting Mark Hughes under pressure. I fear if they start slowly as well, Hughes could quickly become under pressure. I just think, like you said, there was an over-reliance on a handful. Don't get me wrong, if them same players turn up every week again, then they might finish higher than where I'm seeing. They could have quite a sort of, there could be a fairly big bracket that they do end up between. I've got them 9th, but they could invariably get in the top 3 because their first 11 looks strong. But I just think there's too many anomalies and factors that allows me to put them in the top 7 with any confidence. Injury to Cook in the first month of the season. Where do the goals come from? Romani Critchlow, who was there, was very good last season. He's gone on to League One. I've spoken to their fans on YouTube and social media. They're saying the same. Apparently, there's a big change of system. Apparently, Hughes has gone to 3 at the back. Is that going to work? I get what Tom said about the fact that you've got to give him some slack because it was his first season at the level. I can't sit here and say no because I've had the same chat about Neil Harris last season. I just think there's too many teams that have potential to improve past them. Their business has been okay. Have they done enough to get themselves higher than they were last season? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that. Tom, if you want to have a little look at our predictions, anything you'd like to challenge me or Matt on?
Yeah, I'll go with the obvious one. I've obviously gone very high on Barrow, and we spoke between us. We chatted between us before, but I kind of bottled it at the last minute. I had them 7th in place of Bradford, where you challenged me on, and last minute I swapped them round. But obviously, I wasn't quite expecting it to go as high as automatic. So, yeah,
Not sure I was either.
I'll hand over to you there. Barrow.
I can totally see why it looks like a bit of a pick for clicks, because Barrow finishing third in League Two, and maybe that's the perception from one or two people. But I do feel very strongly about this. The first reason is whenever I come to putting my 1 to 24s, I put a lot of faith in, first of all, how good the manager is, and second of all, how popular the manager is with the support base. And I think when you've got a brilliant manager who's incredibly popular with the fans, that's a massive tick in my box. So that's the first reason. And I think in 12 months' time, Pete Wild is going to be EFL managerial hot property in the same way Michael Duff has been previously, or maybe Ian Evett, because his records in League Two and in the National League has been absolutely phenomenal. In 3 of Pete Wild's last 4 full seasons as a manager, he's massively exceeded expectation. And I think if you massively exceed expectation after a 9th place finish, you're pretty close to the automatic promotion spots. I think last season the Bluebirds established a really clear playing identity with that pressing style, good transitional attacks. This year, I think that they've added players that enhance the plan A, but also give them means of winning games in different ways. So, for example, they didn't have a physical focal point last season. They've now got one in Emil Aqua. They didn't have much creativity apart from Ben Whitfield last season. They've now got David Worrell, who is arguably one of the most creative players in the bottom half of League One last season. They've added Cian Spence from Halifax, who's a fantastic midfielder. I think he's someone Pete Wild knows as well. And with that experienced spine as well of Paul Farman and Niall Canavan and Sam Foley, with the team spirit that's in place, with the geographical advantage with training in Manchester in terms of getting loan deals in the last month of the window, I've got a great feeling about Barrow. That's why they're in my top 3.
I think just to go with you on that, I'm high on them as well, and I think I can definitely see the merit in that. The 3 teams that went up last season were all teams that were really well coached and had superb managers, and Pete Wild is a manager that I rate so highly from his time at Halifax originally, and also obviously last season with Barrow. And I remember on the first day when they were winning comfortably against Stockport, and I kind of said to you, look, they won't lose from here because they don't concede many goals. And obviously it was a bit tighter than they might expect, but obviously over the course of the season we saw that they have got a very strong defensive core to them. So I think they'll be tough to beat, definitely. And they almost made it into my playoff consideration, and I think they are the dark horse for me anyway. That's my belief.
I also think that, just to touch on that comparison with Bradford, I think if Bradford are just outside the playoffs, which I think they might be for a large proportion of the season, I think they're going to slump towards the end, because I think the weight of expectation of playing for Bradford City could weigh on some of the players a little bit. Whereas I think at Barrow, because the expectation isn't there in the same way, I think that's going to free the players up a little bit, and it's just going to be a case of getting behind the lads when they maybe go through the odd rough patch. So that's really my theory on Barrow. Matt, I'm going to throw it over to you. What do you want to challenge me and Tom on from our predictions?
Well, I thought you was going to challenge me on Barrow because I went right the other way, but fair enough.
Well, we can have that conversation as well.
I get the whole Peter Wild thing with Barrow. He's a very good coach. He was one of the best coaches in the division last season based on the players that he had at his disposal, the budget that he has to work with, the fan base, the structure, all that type of thing, again, that goes towards being a threat or, a team that struggles. I get that entirely. My concern is people, I think, teams started to find out how to play against them to a degree. There was a drop-off in the second half of the season in terms of less wins, not a huge amount. I totally understand that. Goals dried up. I know that you don't have to score loads in this division because, again, it's a chat that I've had about my own club, and it was a problem that we had at the start of the season. Barrow's problems weren't anything like that. But again, I think there's more teams that have appointed good managers, that have bought good players, but have bigger budgets to be able to maybe, for the want of a blunt word, to buy themselves past Barrow. And I think the Pete Wild thing only takes you so far. If Barrow can develop a plan B, then I think they could have a decent season again. I totally get that. But the proof has to be in the pudding, and I don't think it was last season. I think if you worked out how to play against Barrow, they didn't have an alternative way to play, and it became a problem for them. Like I say, it's a great story, small budget, that type of thing, like Harrogate as well. But I just think there's going to be a few that again, similar to Bradford, will go past them this season and have, for me, a higher ceiling in terms of improvement and ability. If you take out the Pete Wild factor, which I think only takes you so far, because you can only coach and manage to a point. If your players then aren't as good as a lot of other teams, I think then other teams will finish higher.
Yeah, that's right.
You just to quickly jump in, it's just on Emil Aqua, because I've actually a bit of a funny story. On the end of my road where I live at university, there's a barber's, which is like a famous, not famous barber, but it's where all the footballers get their haircuts. Andy Carroll gets his haircut there, obviously plays for Reading, and Emil Aqua gets his haircut there. And I bumped into him, and I will say he is an absolute unit. Like, he's really tall and really big, like really physical. But when you see him play for Maidenhead, he's not like a slow target man. He is, I would say, the closest player I could describe him as is like a bit like Michael Antonio for West Ham, because for Maidenhead.
I mean, that's interesting comparison, because when I watched Michael Antonio, maybe earlier in his career, he was absolutely rapid at like Sheffield Wednesday and Nottingham Forest, and even early on in his time at West Ham. So it's interesting that you've kind of gone for that comparison.
Yeah, he's not quite as quick as that, but it's more the style that for Maidenhead, he was kind of just the sort of up top. We'll just play it up to him and hope that he smashes defender. Like, they've run in the channels, like he runs the channels for a big target man, which is like a bit different. And it's just like a one-man attack basically for Maidenhead. They did have some good complementary attacking players, but a lot of the time they would play it long straight away, and he'd be the only player up there because they'd have.
And that, Tom, that's a great point, and I don't think that should be underestimated, because last season, as good as Josh Gordon was with running in behind and goal scoring, he didn't really win many headers. That's not really his natural game. And Barrow in possession were a direct side, a little bit like you've described with Maidenhead, albeit with maybe a narrower front three, so a bit more support. But so really, Barrow, for much of their season, it was a second ball game. And they still managed to finish ninth. And I just don't think you can underestimate the impact that it'll have, where you've got a team that's used to getting on the end of second balls and attacking it and being aggressive like that. But then you've got that added dimension of getting onto the first balls. So it's a two-pronged attack. You've got a physical centre forward who'll probably win it. And if he doesn't win it, you've got players that are used to getting onto the seconds. That's what really excites me about Barrow.
Yeah, no, I agree. I definitely agree. But obviously we'll we'll have to see on Barrow. Obviously, we've all got slightly different views on them.
Yeah, absolutely. Any more for any more? Matt, do you want to take me on something else?
I've just been desperately having a look. We can't go Walsall, can we? Because we've actually all got them in the same place, which is mad. There's loads of similarities. I suppose the only one, Gabe, that stands out for me in terms of you've gone not a lot lower, but a few places lower. That's the only one that jumps off the page is Mansfield Town. I mean, I've got them just there. I've got them. I said on my season preview, I felt really bad putting them eighth again after they missed out by a single goal last season. So maybe more just to emphasise my concerns, because I still think they're a good side. They're still going to be a threat. They're still going to score plenty of goals. We know the issue they had last season was conceding too many. They've made steps to try and sort that out. I think Bailey Cargill's probably too good for the level if he can stay fit, but that's a fairly big question mark based on the last two seasons. But it's only 2 years ago that he won the title in this division. And I mean, we had him on loan a few years ago as a kid, and you could tell he was going to be a player. I think he went back to Bournemouth and made his debut for the Cherries in a game against Man United at Old Trafford shortly after. It didn't quite work out after that. I think he went north of the border, then he went MK Dons. Reasons why you think such a substantial drop? Because 5 places for a team that scores plenty. I know I've got question marks over Nigel Clough. I think how many chances do you keep giving the same manager before you have to say, right, let's have a change of scenery, let's have a change of voice and a change of opinion and ideas.
Sure.
But I don't see them dropping into the bottom half of the table personally.
Yeah, I understand
Tom
that.
can challenge you more because he's got them in the playoffs as well. So Tom's going to challenge you more than I am.
And they've signed Aidan Flint today as well, so that's a pretty good.
Yeah, this is the trouble, isn't it? You do these things, and then there's still a month for the transfer window.
Well, Tom, do you want to make your case for Mansfield finishing in the playoffs then?
Yeah, sure.
Aidan Flint.
yeah, Aidan Flint. That's it. No, I got quite a lot of stick off of Mansfield fans actually because I criticised their aging squad not so long ago, and I still stand by that. Their signings, when their squad is so old, and they have added. Flint is 34. They added Williams, I think, 30. So they've added, some again experienced players, and they have got experienced core, and they have freshened the side up, especially in the defence. They have added a lot of defensive quality, and that is my concerns with them. But also the reason why I think they will make it into the playoffs because they score goals. Division's top scorers last season. They've got Will Swan back again permanently. Hopefully, he gets more game time for them.
Sure.
Because his goals to minute ratio is fantastic, and the defensive quality that they've added, I just think, they were a goal off, weren't they, in the playoffs? So, I think that they've shored things up. I perhaps rate Nigel Clough slightly higher than most people. Maybe it's a nostalgic bias there, but I still think he can just get them over the line. And Aidan Flint's an interesting one as well because I'm not sure. Obviously, he only played I think less than 10 games last season. So while he's undoubtedly quality, will he have the impact that many are expecting? I don't know. But I'll pass over to you now because obviously we've got some pressing views on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see where it seems like a big drop off. I suppose the sort of conventional wisdom is they finish 8th last season. They've since added to it, so why would you have them sort of 6 spaces lower when they've had a lot of injuries last season? So why are they going to drop off if they don't have the same injury crisis? So I do get all that, but for me, the thing with Northampton is they relied on a core of 6 players who started a fair proportion of the league games last season. And I'm not convinced when players get over them older than sort of 29, 30, I do have a slight question mark or a little bit of an asterisk as to whether they're going to be able to copy and paste their form from the previous season. When it comes to younger players who are around 20, you think they're going to be better than last season because that's the general trajectory. It might be a lot better, it might be about the same, but likely it's going to get better. I think the reverse is true with older players where there's that possibility of them dropping off. And I'm not sure that I'm willing to trust Nigel Clough to evolve the squad as required. I think the board want a bit more of a developmental model, but I don't think that's something that Nigel Clough is necessarily on board with, and I think that's why we've seen some of these compromise signings like Aidan Flint and George Williams, sort of experienced players, because I think that's what Clough wants. And I'm also concerned that they've not freshened things up enough for me in midfield or attack. They're relying on a lot of midfielders who were injured last season to all of a sudden rediscover full sharpness and top form, and I'm not sure they can do that. They've signed Aidan Flint, who isn't the quickest defender in the world. So if you're playing in a back 4, I think there's the risk if the fullbacks go high up, he's going to get caught in 1v1s. It could work if he's in the middle of a back 3, flanked by 2 quick, strong, wide centre backs. But then they've also brought in Alfie Kilgore, who isn't the quickest either. So I've got a few concerns over Mansfield and just the age profile of the squad and whether there's going to be enough players that are improving to kind of counterbalance maybe a few others dropping off.
Time will tell.
I think that's totally fair, and that is my main concern with them is the age, and I got a bit of stick because they have added some more youthful players, but that is my main concern. I mean, you're looking at that, I think I can't remember the top of my head, but I think it's their top 6 appearance. Yeah, like you said, this core 6. I think Elliot Hewitt was the youngest out of them, 29.
Yeah.
So you've got players, all the other 5 are all north of 30. Maybe other than him, who's 28 in goal.
But like Akins and Barry, I can't see them being top 7 League Two strikers this season. Stephen Quinn's, what is he, 38 now? I mean, is he going to do it again? I don't know, man. I think there's a few players that I could see dropping off a level, and I'm not sure Mansfield they've not added a new player to their attack. I don't think they've added a new player to their midfield. It feels a little bit like resting on laurels for me. So that's
Harbottle's
really
a big miss as well. Harbottle will be a big miss at centre.
Harbottle.
He was kind of the youthful player they had last season, and obviously he's gone obviously to Scotland. So I can see why, but I just think they have got enough quality. But I can completely see where. And again, they were another team that when we discussed it, and probably the week or so before, I was kind of completely on board, thinking, they're going to drop out. But then the more time went on, the more I looked at it, I thought, well, they do score a lot of goals, so, and they have added some defensive quality. So it's another team that could go either way, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's for me. That's the thing this season with this division. I think there's so many teams. They've got there's a huge caveat between and bracket in terms of where they could finish. You could have a situation where there's probably only sort of 8-10 points separate 15 places or something ridiculous. I just think there's so many teams. I said on my season preview, I think there's probably 8-12 teams think they can get in the top 3, and there's probably 16 teams that think they can get in the playoffs. Which makes it very exciting, but it makes these things bloody hard work.
Absolutely. Well, I'll pick up one, which is Matt. You've got Harrogate Town to go down, and I can see your reasoning for it, because they finished 17th, 19th, and 19th in their first 3 seasons in the EFL. They towards the bottom end in terms of budget, and the league's got stronger. And if you finish 19th last season in a stronger league, it's probably fair to say that 23rd is a reasonable prediction. But normally there's I just look at the stability that Harrogate Town have got under Simon Weaver, and the fact that they found some really solid form in the second half of last season as well. I just want to challenge you a little bit on your relegation pick.
Again, and there's ifs and maybes, isn't there? But that's the case with all of it at the moment, because we've not seen a team play a game. But the general trend over 3 seasons has been downwards. And I don't want to be disrespectful to Harrogate, but I think if they finish 22nd or above, they've had a good season again. To all intents and purposes, they're a non-league side. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. Fan base, budget, like you've already said, size of ground, it all has a very nice non-league feel. There's then the romanticism of dad and son, chairman, manager combination. I've got one concern in terms of the playing staff is if Luke Armstrong leaves between now and the window, that takes a huge chunk of their goals away. It takes a huge way that they play the game away as well. Would they then be able to get someone else in to replicate that style of play, score them goals? I know he doesn't score loads and loads, but he scores enough to keep Harrogate's head above water. My other issue is if Harrogate start horrendously badly, and forgive me, I forgot the chairman's name.
Irving Weaver.
Is there enough about him to maybe sack his son?
Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it?
So that for me is a big question mark, because, like I said, it's a great story. But if they say lose their first half dozen games, they get to 12 games, they're in the bottom 2, they've only won a couple. Will he make the change? Will he be bold enough and brave enough to go away from something that's worked so well for the last decade or more? Similar to Nigel Clough at Mansfield, I think a change of a voice and manager could freshen things up. I'm not sure Irving Weaver's got that in him if Harrogate don't start as well as they perhaps want to. Their squad, again, with no disrespect intended, is bottom 2 for me. Certainly, if you take Luke Armstrong out of it, I think they've got a big problem. Romanticism and this story of how they've come from non-league to get promoted into the Football League, again, for me, only lasts so long and only takes you so far. And I think, unfortunately, this just might be the season where they don't quite have enough to keep their heads above water.
I do agree that it's inevitable that they will be relegated eventually. I think that you are right. It only will last a certain amount of time. And I worry slightly about them. Gosh, sorry. I worry slightly about them because they've lost Patterson, who's a huge player for them. Huge amount of goals. I mean, he 9 goals from midfield can't be underestimated. And that's 2 seasons in a row. But like we said, they've still got Armstrong, who isn't just about his goals. He basically played every single minute last season, which I think he missed about 20 minutes across the whole campaign.
That's my concern. He's such a big player, not just in terms of numbers, but in how they play, the amount he plays. It's a huge void to try and replace if someone decides that they want to come and I don't think it'd take a huge amount for Harrogate to accept a bid.
Just to jump in there, though, Matt, he's contracted until 2025, and while, from what I can gather, there is some interest in Luke Armstrong, I think the power is in the club's hands because he's under contract, and I think they'll probably hold out for a big fee, and that would probably allow them to maybe bring in 3 or 4 players in the last couple of weeks of the window if they were to lose him. So I feel like that probably favours them a little bit.
Oh, yeah. And if he's got 2 years in his contract, then understand that the power's with them. It's not like he's approaching the last 6 months and we're getting, the Harry Kane situation at the moment, like we're seeing in the Premier League with Tottenham. It's but what's a big fee for Harrogate? That would be my question. Everyone has.
To do another Premier League comparison, this is a years old Premier League comparison, but to me, Harrogate feel like a Wigan from yesteryear, where Wigan were every single season, not above the relegation zone. Until eventually, I mean, they won the FA Cup and went down. I'm sure Harrogate would probably take that if that happened. But it wasn't, it was every season you think Wigan are down this year, and then they did stay up. And I obviously haven't put them to go down. I think they have got just enough because of the continuity, and I think they're also fortunate. There's a couple of clubs, more than a couple of clubs, a handful of clubs that are perhaps very poorly run, and that seems to be the trend of teams that drop out of this division. It seems to be teams that are poorly run off the field that drop out. And just want to raise James Daly, who I think will be a really exciting addition to the league because he is unrefined. His decision making isn't the best. He sometimes have the opportunity to pass and then not pass, or he'll sometimes have the opportunity to shoot and pass instead. But he's incredibly quick. And he's just such a raw, talented player.
Centre forward.
Centre forward or off the left wing. And he's left-footed and he can play across there. And he's played in a Woking team, which is pretty tactically flexible. So he might not add an amazing amount of goals. I think he was just shy of double figures, but he certainly will get into some really good positions. So he's a really exciting player to watch this season. For me, stepping up from non-league.
Absolutely, we'll have to see how he gets on. Anything, Tom, you'd like to challenge us on, picking up another one from the table?
It's kind of one that I've been doubting myself, but I'll go with Grimsby. You've got them in the playoffs.
Sure.
There's just a team that I just couldn't put, just because of the strength of the division, really. Not really because it's light on them. And I think their fans feel that this is the season they'll get. They've had a really good first season back. They'll get there, but just want to know what your case is to definitely have them in there.
Sure, there's a number of things. First of all, I would concede that it's a stronger league, and I can understand why that's been a problem for some people in terms of putting Grimsby in the top 7. But for me, I take trajectory very seriously, and I take the structure of clubs very seriously. And the fact Grimsby have gone from promotion to top half and best FA Cup run since 1939 and highest league finish in 17 years, for me, that's really significant under an ownership regime led by Jason Stockwood and Andrew Pettit, who do a fantastic work. They've also got a manager in Paul Hurst who's thrived as an underdog before. And I think the fact that Grimsby are a little bit of an underdog in the context of the competition in the league might almost suit them a little bit. They achieved what they did last season with a 35-year-old target man, and while Ryan Taylor did a decent job, I think with Danny Rose what you get is that relentless work ethic and constantly on the run. And I think that they're a good aggressive second ball side last season. Now they've got that extra mobility up top, which I think is going to make a huge difference. And I see Rose spearheading a really successful Grimsby attack. And they've also signed Camille Conte, who I know you're a massive fan of from his time in the National League. And I think he's different to anything they've had in midfield, certainly last season, because of his press resistance qualities. And it allows Grimsby to look after the ball in different ways to maybe the way they did last season. So that will be my main case for the Baroness.
Yeah, on Conte, it's very strange. He had the sort of disastrous, is maybe a strong word, but he had not a great start to his loan spell. He was, I remember early on there was sort of questions whether he'd be sent back, but he turned it round, which I think shows his resilience of his character. And he's just such a good player. Like this, he just is. You know, when you just watch a player and you think, wow, he's just quality. All round game is just unbelievable. He doesn't really ever have to break a sweat because he just seems to be in the right position at the right time and have that knack of protecting the ball. And because he's such a big, strong lad, he can protect the ball if he's under pressure. But oftentimes he doesn't even need to because he's just so safe in possession. So he, again, not to keep going on about these non-league players that are stepping up, but it just happens it's the second one in a row. He's one that I'm really excited about. I even thought maybe it was ambitious, but I thought maybe he'd be involved with Middlesbrough this season. Not as a starter.
Well, we've seen it with Hayden Hackney, though, haven't we? Like, players can make a huge step up. I mean, Hackney didn't necessarily have a brilliant time at Scunthorpe, and then Leo Perkovic gave him a few games, and all of a sudden he came into their side under Carrick. So, can happen, can it?
Exactly. I just thought he might be involved, and especially in pre-season, I thought he'd be given a chance to kind of show what he's about. So the fact that
Grimsby gone permanently as well, which I think is really impressive.
Exactly, that's what surprised me. When I saw he went to Grimsby, I think someone messaged me saying he's gone to Grimsby. I thought, oh, good loan move. I thought, fair enough. And then when I went on his permanent, I was completely shocked. So, yeah, that is some sign in that for me. And I really like Toby Malarkey as well, who signed from Rochdale. I thought,
I think he's starting the season injured, so hopefully he can get back to it nice and quickly. Yeah, Matt, can you fancy taking on another one from the
just one query for me on Grimsby would be the home form. If you look at last season, that held them back. I think there was only 5 teams that won less on their own patch than Grimsby. So I think that's something they've certainly got to improve on if they want to have serious ambitions. I like their business. I think it's really good. And obviously Paul Hurst is very, very astute at the level and will get the best out of that group of players. But yeah, I think I was... 1 minute, I've just lost the table. 2 seconds.
Go on. I've got it up here, mate.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. I think I was similar to Tom. Yeah. 11th and 10th. Yeah. So there was just a couple of bits that had me holding back on Grimsby, but I certainly think they'll at least match last season. Another fear for me a little bit is how much as the season before last, National League playoff campaign and the cup run and everything else, will that catch up with them a little bit? But yeah, I think I'm not clutching at straws, but I think you're trying to find negatives. It looks very positive around Grimsby at the moment. And again, it's another one that could, with a decent start and some confidence, they could gate crash them top 7 positions. In terms of challenge, not a challenge, but I want to get your take on it because I want to ask about my football club.
Sure.
You've both got us just outside the playoffs at the moment. Obviously, there's always a little bit of bias when I try to do these things, and I try to do it as rationally and realistically as possible. What would it take for you two, for Gillingham, to become a top 7, top 5, top 3 team? Because, again, all the signs from last term, certainly from January onwards, there was only Stockport that were better than us. I think we've improved the group. Defensively, I think we're going to be one of the best in the division with the players that we've added in key areas. So yeah, just wanted your boys' thoughts on what between now and the end of August would it take to make us a promotion playoff side.
Well, I'll happily go first on this, Tom, and you can maybe follow me up on it. I think that, first of all, I've got some reservations about the situation up top, because you've got your target man in Ollie Hawkins, you've got a really creative forward in Tom Nichols who's hoping to build on strong form from the second half of last season. But for me, I wanted to see a mobile, physical focal point come in. Now, I appreciate maybe it's difficult to get that player in, especially seeing as your Andy Cooks and your Luke Armstrong seem to want to sort of stay up north, and obviously money's a factor, even though Gillingham are quite well backed nowadays. I'm not quite sure that Ashley Nadesan was quite the signing up top that you really needed. And secondly, I also have some doubts over Neil Harris, because he's sort of been quite keen to sort of play down the budget element of it. Mm-hmm. And I almost feel like that's kind of part of his nature. The fact that he's a centre forward that came up from the non-leagues. I think he was at Cambridge City even, and then went to Millwall, who are sort of an overlooked team in the Championship historically. And you kind of feel like, and then as manager at Millwall, it was a case of taking them up from League One, but then in the Championship he kind of thrived as the underdog. And it's felt like Neil Harris is at his best when there's almost a little bit of adversity. And I don't know that I've seen Neil Harris do it over a full season where he's been expected to deliver from the start. And he has delivered. Maybe you could argue the 16-17 season, but even in that year, it was recovering from a tough first 3 months. So that's the psychology of it, and how Neil Harris handles expectation. It's not something I've seen him do too much before, and that's maybe the slight question mark that I've got there. So two things, really, the centre forward position, and also, is Neil Harris going to manage that expectation well? Because he seems to want to play it down a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, it's a similar story. The goals was the big issue. I think that I know you were linked with obviously I know that the link with May, and also linked with Deepo Akinyemi, who could have when he was first linked up and the bids were being turned down by I thought it was that they weren't selling, but clearly there was a price for him to be bought.
I believe that we went in and we offered what we thought was sensible for what he'd achieved, based with a year on his contract, and Air were basically said double it. And I think York have paid well over the odds. So that's no disrespect to Akinyemi. But I think 300,000 for a kid that's come out of non-league is a huge amount of money for someone that's still relatively unproven.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a fee. That is a lot, yeah. But I know that you've been linked with these, type of striking. Yeah, that's fair enough, and it's about being sensible, and I can completely see that, and I can see why people have got you in the playoffs, and lots of people have even got you automatics because of that form in the second half of the season. I think you did tail off ever so slightly at the very, very end. I know you lost to Newport late on, and stuff like that.
Lost our last home game, yeah, which was disappointing. It was very flat. Felt like a very much an end of season performance, almost like we'd hit a wall from getting ourselves out of trouble. But then you have to remember we went to Salford the week after and won 1-0. So
exactly that. And I think that is my only concerns with that is the goals, and it is also the fact that you had that start. And are you perhaps capable of having that sort of start again? Are you? And is there a case that it was a really good run of form, or is it a genuine upward trajectory? I think you are on an upward trajectory, and I've got you finishing much higher, and I can easily see you pushing into the playoffs. But I still have those slight reservations. I think Johnny Williams will actually add a lot of will add goals himself, so that might address the goal concern that there'll be goals from across the pitch rather than from the centre forward. But I do feel you are a quality striker short.
I would just add, sort of challenge what you said there about Akinyemi. I totally understand how 300 grand for a National League centre forward is a lot of money. But I also feel like you're willing to pay big wages for Johnny Williams, who wouldn't have been short on suitors. And I just wonder, would the trade-off have been worth actually making the big money signing the centre forward? Because having that spearhead, the right centre forward, is so important to the way Neil Harris's sides play. You think of Steve Morrison for his Millwall side when they had 3 great seasons. You think of Kiefer Moore at Cardiff. I just feel like a strong focal point is really important. Maybe Ollie Hawkins can be that, but I would say a physical centre forward that's reasonably mobile as well, I think could really make a difference. And I'm just not sure that I necessarily see that at the moment. So that's why I'm not quite sure about Gillingham
No, that's
quite.
fine. That's
Have I made it up that Macaulay Bonne is on trial, or have I made...
Macaulay Bonne was spotted sat in the home dugout at an open training session on Monday, and Neil Harris has come out today and said that Bonne came to him and said that he wants to train, he wants to get fit, he's going to have a look at us, we're going to have a look at him. So it seems that there's definitely interest. Obviously, he knows our goalkeeping coach, he knows Johnny Williams, he knows Jules Lapsley from his time at Charlton. He's not, I don't think you'd put him in the mobile target man category, but I think you'd certainly put him in the fox in the box category. So again, then it would probably give us a better blend of strikers. I think the Naderson one came out of the blue. He suddenly became available, and we said, well, for the fee that we were rumoured to pay, I think it was another one. We thought, right, let's get him in because it's only going to add to the group. Back to the Akinyemi thing, I get what you're saying. You know, strikers, and I've said this on my videos, they're the hardest. You have to pay bigger bucks for them. But to counter that, I think we might have paid Johnny Williams slightly more in wages, but we've not had to pay a fee for Johnny Williams. So it's about the balance of getting the right players in and still doing it in a sustainable manner. I would back the club if 300,000 is what Ayr were asking for a player that's relatively unproven. I can see why we potentially walked away from it. But no, thank you. I wanted to find out what you think the difference could be. Maybe Macaulay Bonne could be. Who knows? Maybe someone else might be still. There's still plenty of time in the window.
And the 300 grand is a lot. 300 grand is a lot better. We paid 50 grand for Langstaff. And obviously, I think he, scored 30 goals at the National League North-South level, where I think Akinyemi has hit double figures, but not anything like 30. So that is 300 grand. If that is the fee, that is a lot of money, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, while we've got you on, we might as well talk about Notts County, because I've got Notts County as my title winners. I think you are maybe keen to not come across as being biased, perhaps slightly, because you've actually got Wrexham winning the title and Notts County finishing third, which would still be an incredible achievement. But Matt, you've got Notts County just missing out on the top three, and it feels silly me asking you why you've got a team that's come up from the National League playoffs finishing fourth, because in so many ways that's a very positive prediction as well. But why did you maybe shy away from putting them in the top three?
It's a good question. Nothing more than because it's so tough at the top this season. I don't think there's any. I don't think if you look at the Notts County squad, the manager, the setup, the business, I don't think there's anything that says you can't see them potentially being in the top three, potentially winning the title. But it just gets so tricky at that top period of the table that you have to put clubs somewhere, and that's it wasn't, pin the tail on a donkey type thing or stick a needle in a haystack, but it felt a bit like that in the top portion of the table because there's so many good sides. And like I said earlier, there's so many teams that think they can win the league, get into the top three. There's so many more that think they can get into the top seven. But everything about Notts County says they're going to have a terrific season. The only caveat to that was, and I heard this today on another EFL podcast, I didn't realise that it was no team since 2015-16 has come up and gone straight through. I thought there'd been, for me, it seemed to be like every other season that a team come up from the National League and went straight into League One. So that surprised me a little bit. Maybe I subconsciously knew that, I don't know. But then I can't say that because I've got Wrexham in the top three. So no, there's nothing negative to say about Notts County. I think their business is really good. Jody Jones. I'm just trying to find where I wrote everything down for mine. Will Randall, David McGoldrick's obviously the big one that stands out. Danny Crowley, if you can get him in a team that plays the right way. I'm not sure he's played in clubs and systems that have suited him necessarily over the last few seasons. David McGoldrick obviously is the massive one of the top scorers in League One last season. It'd be brilliant if he could come back to the club and fire him to the title. I get that. But no, there was no other reason than it was just getting that tricky in the top 5, 6, 7, 8 positions of the table. But I like Notts County a lot, and it's great to see them back in the Football League because they're a football league club, and always should be.
Totally. Tom?
Yeah, no. The only concerns I have And it's not even concerns. I saw a tweet today from John McKenzie, and he said, if you are only ever talking positively about your football club, you're probably doing something wrong. And in our NOTS NCS News group chat, we kind of spoke about it, and there's a feeling that that's perhaps what's going on a little bit in our fan base, is that it's just so positive. It's perhaps we're being a bit blinkered, but I actually think that we're quite an inherently negative fan base. We find faults where there don't seem to be faults. There's already discontent over the goalkeeper, Ainstone. We've not even played a single minute of Football League action.
That's the one question mark that I'd probably have over Notts County.
Yeah, but I think he adds what we need, which is a keeper that plays out from the back, and he is. I think you would struggle to find a keeper that better with his feet. That simple as that. He looks very, very, very good with his feet, and I think maybe my only concern would be that even though Williams has said that his priority is to make us, he'd rather be like the best defence in the league than the highest scorers. I've paraphrased in there, but that's kind of the gist he was getting at. My concern is that with the signings we've made, that wouldn't necessarily tell the story, because we've signed a lot of attacking players, even though
and you play a ridiculously high line as well.
Yeah, we do play a very, very high line, but I think you have to, because there's not many sides, if any, that keep as much possession. I mean, we average 70%, which that's our average. Like I think that's insane, because that would be a good for a one-off game. So the fact that we're averaging that suggests that and there's games where Wrexham where we only kind of, Wrexham we did actually dominate possession, but there are games where we didn't dominate as much. Chesterfield we never got over 60% against Chesterfield. So there obviously are games where we've had like 80%, and that might not happen as much this season. But I have every reason to be optimistic. McGoldrick is just a ridiculously good footballer, and I think the great thing about David McGoldrick is that he's getting the attention and maybe the attention. That's the only word I can think of, is that it's going to be on him. Yeah. I don't actually think he's going to be our main man. I can't really see him playing more than 65-70% of minutes, which, if he's the man that's getting all the focus from opposition, then you've got players, Langstaff, Sam Austin is a player that's going completely under the radar as well, because of
I think it's because he's not played in the Football League before, that I think a lot of outsiders probably, and the fact you signed Dan Crowley and David McGoldrick. So I mean, it's going to be hard for him to get into that starting 11, but he could be a bit of a wild card off the bench, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think he is in our starting 11 at the minute, which is crazy to think, when all last season the whole conversation was, Ruben will be going in the summer, but it's Sam Austin's season next season. He's going to be the main man of our whole team, pretty much, and he's probably doesn't even get in it now, which fills me with confidence, because I think we've got so much quality and depth.
Yeah. Well, the important thing to me was you signed. Who's the defender you've just signed, Tom? It skipped my mind.
We signed Ollie Tipton on loan from
Ollie Tipton. There we go. That's the one. I think that was quite an important addition to me, because I was worried that you maybe wouldn't have, when Aidan Baldwin's out, and he started 29 games last season, maybe struggled with that high line a little bit in one or two games. So I think it's going to be really important that you've got other players who can provide the pace. So if Baldwin's out, you've got that dimension covered.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the concern, because I think Aidan Baldwin is a fantastic, fantastic footballer. Everyone will say they've got the best defender in the league, but I think he's easily League One quality defender. Never mind League Two. It's just he isn't available enough, and that has been a consistent theme across his whole career. It's not just an unlucky injury-plagued season last year. It's been a consistent theme across his whole career, and hence why he signed for us. We wouldn't have got him if he hadn't had those issues. So it's a worry, and I'm glad we've got Tipton in. I still think we're slightly lacking quality in at right centre back, and that's no slight on Rawlinson and Brindley. I think they're both good. They're both solid League Two defenders.
Is Brindley going to be quick enough as an outside centre back in a high line?
Yeah, I think he's lost a bit of pace over the last 12 months as well. But he again, he's a good player. He's a solid League Two player, I think. But again, is he a top 3 League Two defender? I'm unsure.
Sure.
But I think we will. The thing that I and I don't want to. Obviously, I could talk about Notts all day, so I want to not go on about too long and wrap up a little bit. But I think the high line has maybe been over exaggerated because we will dominate games if we are to play the same way we did this season, and we have the players to do it. We will concede chances because of the way we play.
Sure.
We're very unlucky at times, but over the course of a full season, we're pretty good. And I think we will just pass. Not pass teams to death is the wrong word because we don't pass for the sake of it. We pass for a purpose. But we will hopefully limit teams. If a team's got 30% possession against us, there's only so many chances they can create. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, really exciting, I think, for Notts County. Matt, anything you will fancy picking up? Doesn't have to be a challenge, just a talking point that you fancy raising.
Just having a look. The only one, Colchester look intriguing, don't they? I see you've got them in the top 10. I've got them just below midway, and Tom's got them a little further down in 17th. But I think they're another club that could have a fairly sizable bracket in terms of where they could finish this season. I think, again, if they get going early on and can breed some confidence, I think they could have a decent season. I certainly don't think they'll be looking over their shoulder too much like they have been in recent years. I suppose to counter that, again, the only other problem is Junior Shamadou looks likely to leave in the window, and Noah Chilvers is another one, I suppose, that there'd be concerns around about interest from higher up. But I think if you go back to, I'm not a massive fan of Ben Garner, but I think you'd say his standout work was with Swindon in this division a few seasons ago in similar circumstances as well. So they look like a really intriguing one for me. If they could add a few more in the window, I think they might be able to jump maybe into the top 12, the top 10. But again, if they lose Shamadou and lose Chilvers and don't replace them properly, I think then they might be then looking over their shoulder a little bit more than ideal. But how do you two see them going? They look like a really sort of interesting watch from an outsider's perspective this season.
Yeah, I think Chamadou is obviously going to be a loss. Seeing as he's going to Stoke, I'd be happy to assume that they'll get a good fee, hopefully 7 figures for him, because he's a huge talent. I think they've got an exciting group of players there. I think they've got a solid, reliable core in terms of Connor Hall, John Akinde, Chilvers, if he stays, Matt Jay, he's done it before at this level with Exeter. And then they've got a really exciting young group of young players coming through the academy, probably the best group of homegrown talent I've seen at Colchester since maybe the mid-2010s. And they've got a manager who specialises in youth development, in Ben Garner, and that's where he does his best work. He's got some great contacts in the youth scene as well. He's worked at Premier League clubs, and I think that's part of why you're seeing seeing Colchester get a loan signing from one of his former clubs in Owen Goodman on loan from Palace. Also signed Mauro Bandera, the midfielder, on loan from Arsenal, and Nico Lawrence, who Tom can probably tell you more about, got incredible reviews in the National League with Torquay last season. So I think they're going to do very well in the loan market. They already have. I expect them to improve a few places. And also it feels like there's a bit of a restructuring at Colchester. Tony Humes has left, who was kind of maybe part of the malaise from the club previously. Ben Garner is the first time Colchester have started a season with an external appointment in quite a while. So I think there's lots of reason for quiet optimism at Colchester. Yeah. I think they're going to make some progress.
I think the fact that they're not an Ipswich retirement home as well is very refreshing as well, and that's no disrespect to them players, but it just became a bit predictable, didn't it? If someone was 35 and out of contract at Portman Road, invariably they were going to end up at whatever it's called now. I want to say Layer Road, but that's because I'm old. JobServe Community Stadium. It's got quite the ring to it, hasn't it? Yeah, I think the approach looks very refreshing and a bit braver than it always has been. Yeah, so I think it'll be certainly one club to keep an eye on. Over to you, Tom.
I mean, it could be one I've got horribly wrong, and even putting them there, it was one that I knew that would be kind of one that people would pick up on, and it's one I wasn't 100% happy with myself, but it's just like, the strength of the league. There were teams that I just wanted to put above them. And maybe looking at that, maybe Forest Green should have had them above them. I'm not sure actually, but
in your defence, Tom, it is hard because even looking at your table, there's teams above Colchester that you'd say should probably be higher as well. So it's like it's such a difficult league to predict.
Yeah, and I think it's only a few points will make that difference. It's not really massive between 17th and say 14th. It's only a couple of points, and the only thing I can clutch at straws with is that their signings are all pretty much young players, either on loan or Tom Smith on a free from Arsenal. He's a solid keeper, but they're all young Premier League players, and yes, they could do well. And I am a massive fan of Nico Lawrence, to confirm that he's a really, really good defender, and Bandera as well. I've been impressed whenever I've seen him in Premier League too. But there is a chance that whenever you get these young players that they don't click and they haven't necessarily got experience. But I know Colchester have a good record with some loanees. So
yeah, I feel like the fact they've got players like Connor Hall in midfield, Chilvers, of course, if they can keep hold of him, I feel like they've got enough of a core of the experienced players that kind of counterbalances that. So that's where I'd be. I'm excited about Colchester. Tom, which one do you want to? Where do you want to finish? What do you fancy bringing up from these?
We haven't spoken about Wrexham, and we've all agreed on Stockport, and I feel we've all agreed they're going up. But Wrexham, Gav, you've missed them slightly out from the top three, and
yeah,
I agree that perhaps they dominate conversation because it's Wrexham, but it feels a little bit remiss to not talk about them.
Sure. So why have you got them in your? Why have you got them as champions, Tom?
I just think they're a team that they find a way to win. I listened to a podcast with Ryan from NL Musings today, and he described them as, he said he was he didn't want to make the comparison, but he's going to did it anyway, kind of thing. It was a non-league Man United, Fergie's Man United, and it kind of it did resonate because it almost did feel like that last season. It was they could be drawing or even losing going into the last 10, but you just knew that they would find a way to win. They are inevitable, and I think the fact they haven't got like a distinct playing style actually goes in their favour. Like they have so many different. It's not like they've got a plan A, B, and C. Like the plan A, they've got an A, B, and C. They've got so many different ways they can hurt you. They're possibly the best set piece team I've ever seen. Like they are just so good at every single type of set piece. Their delivery is so good, and they've got a big team as well. I mean, they've got a big group of lads. So.
Is it not possible, though, Tom, that against a higher standard of opposition, not having a set playing style actually goes against them a little bit more, because you're almost wanting, when there's more of a challenge, you want more of a playing identity to fall back on. Whereas I look at what you've got with Notts County, and it's like it's always going to be pretty much plan A, plan A, and plan A. I'm not saying there's not going to be some flexibility in terms of the variations with plan A, but plan A is still plan A. Whereas with Wrexham, are they going to have that same continuity?
Yeah, no, I completely see that, and I think as well, this is with all due respect to the National League, because I'm a huge fan of the National League, as you know, but some of the teams in this league might not fold under the pressure as easily as the National League clubs did. Also, almost felt like Wrexham had won the game at home before you even gone there. It was like a champion boxer, like a Mike Tyson in his prime. They've lost before they've even got in the ring. It was kind of like go to the race course and they've got the 3 points already. When most teams went there, and I think it's going to take a few teams to go there and have a real go at them. You can get at them. You can. Halifax showed that, and Halifax weren't particularly amazing last season. They got at them and got the result. And yeah, again, they're a team that they don't necessarily play a high line, but they haven't got amazing amounts of pace in the back line, especially when they've got Hayden has been injured. He's an injury-prone player as well, a bit like Baldwin. For Notts, and Mullin is obviously injured to start the season, which is a big one. I don't know if he's even back.
That's a big one. But those long throws from Ben Tozer into Will Boyle and Aaron Hayden in the box, or Tommy O'Connor's set piece. Matt will know about Tommy O'Connor's set pieces from his time at Gillingham into those players. That's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, and they've got as well, whoever partners Mullin is invariably either Dolby or Palmer, who's 6'3", 4+ both of them. So they've got height there. So even though there's a caveat that Toes is one of their biggest players and he's taking the throws, you've still got 3 6'3", 4 players in there. And Mullin normally who's destructive in the box as well. So it's the set pieces for me that are massive. Teams just don't seem to be able to defend against them. I'm not sure. And that's part the biggest contrast between us and them, not to make it all about us again, but we will probably put 1 in 20, 30 deliveries into the box. We never, ever put them in the box. So
always going short. Yeah.
We never, ever put them in the box, ever.
Yeah. Matt, how big a loss do you think Paul Mullen's going to be for the start of the season? Because Sam Dolby and Ollie Palmer tended to be the ones playing alongside Paul Mullen last season rather than simultaneously. There's rumours that they might have been interested in James Norwood, but as we discussed off air, he's gone to Oldham. Are they going to try and go for someone like Luke Armstrong at Harrogate just as another goal scorer to try and get?
Potentially. I mean, you'd have to ask Misters Reynolds and McElhenney rather than me. But obviously they've got the clout to essentially go and get anyone that they want from League One or League Two if they feel they have to and need to. But of course, Paul Mullen knows how they play, their various ways and niches and that type of thing. So it's obviously going to be a loss when you're taking out that amount of numbers from a successful side. And he looked a decent player at Cambridge. He's been ridiculous for Wrexham over the last 2 years. So yeah, I can't see it being anything other than a hindrance. But their squad is ridiculous for the level, isn't it, in terms of options and cover? Like you said, you've already mentioned Ollie Palmer, others.
They've not gone mad in the window though, Matt, have they?
They've only signed one player, haven't they, I think, which is Will Boyle. But obviously it's a player that's come out of the Championship, albeit it's a player that's out of the Championship, not played loads, but he teams up with his old mate Ben Tozer again, so that can only be a positive. Elliot Lee, we've not mentioned. Tommy O'Connor's only been mentioned once. Of course, it'd be interesting to see how they adjust to league football and whether they get a bit giddy with it. I think would be my fear in the first few weeks of the season. It might just be that they get caught up in not the hype of the Hollywood and all that, because that's been done, I think, unless you're Sky Sports. But I think in terms of the hype of being a football league club again after 15 years away, that might potentially cause them an issue start of the season, like Stockport last season, where it took them sort of 10, 12 games to adjust. But you just feel that once they do adjust, they're going to be a hell of a force. And by then, Mullin would be back anyway, regardless of whether they've started poorly or fairly well over the first 10, 12 games.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm necessarily expecting Wrexham to start on fire because they played their last game of their US tour last Saturday. So presumably they flew back Sunday at the earliest. Monday and Tuesday, probably recovering from jet lag. Yeah. So I do kind of wonder, for me, if I was in their shoes, I'd have probably cut off the US tour maybe the week before and maybe play the final pre-season game domestically, because you kind of want players to have 2 weeks just being in that space of tunnel vision, focusing on MK Dons on the opening day, rather than kind of getting into this sort of Hollywood bubble, if you like, of sort of signing autographs and taking, well, it's more selfies nowadays, isn't it? I'm sounding a bit old, but it's you know what I mean, that sort of environment where it's like calm, focused, tunnel vision, because that's what I think it's going to be for MK Dons. And yeah, I just wonder how that's going to work personally.
Yeah, that was my concern was as well, is that the US tour, while it's been brilliant for them, obviously revenue is going to bring in loads of money, and no one could compete with them financially pretty much anyway, and that just adds to it. Yeah, it's not the best preparation, I don't think, and MK Dons is a tough opening day. You know, they've just come down and they're the team that people are expecting out of the relegated teams to do well. On their strikers, Mullin did win them the league, because he won them that game against us. It was his individual brilliance in the second half that turned that game on its head. So he is a big miss. And obviously, I know people think he'll be back. They're optimistic, but obviously he's going to take him time to get fully match fit. But I just wondered what your opinion on Billy Waters is. Obviously, he's a good deputy player to have, and he doesn't get mentioned. He didn't really play for them at all. But he obviously said in League Two, he did pretty well in League Two.
Yeah, there might have been a slight connection issue there. Hopefully you can hear me now. I think with Billy Waters, I see him as a bit of an energetic number 10 who can kind of carry the ball on. Speaking to Wrexham fans, they seem to think he can play as a second striker. For me, I would see him more as a rotation option for Elliot Lee personally. I still think they need to bring in another goal scorer. I'm not sure Billy Waters can do that.
Right, fair enough.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to see. Well, listen, gents, it's been so interesting discussing our predictions. Tom, thank you so much for coming on to the EFL Debate Thursday show for the first time. Hopefully have you on a lot more across the season, and delighted to welcome in Notts County into the EFL. Matt, always a pleasure. Go follow Tom H. Williams 23 on Twitter because he's done some outstanding stuff, as I say. Go follow Gills in the Blood TV as well. This has been EFL Debate, the League 2 season preview, and we'll see you again very soon.